Madam Chair, if everyone is kind of settled, we'll go ahead and get started. We'll just do a quick work session. We'll run through the agenda, and then we'll do some elections. It's that time of year.
Fantastic. Sounds good.
All right, thank you. I think we'll start though, acknowledging our two new commissioners. Hopefully you had a chance to meet in the other room, but warm welcome to Michaela and TJ joining the commission. Both have interest and passion for historic preservation, wanted to help serve, and were appointed last week at the city council meeting. So really excited to have you both on board.
We're so happy you're here.
So for tonight's agenda, just real quickly, items A and B are revised findings from the last time the commission met. Just as a reminder, these aren't public hearings, so no testimony taken. They're just be
Right.
discussion and motion amongst the commissioners.
Can we move them to the consent or we need to?
I would make separate motions on those away from
Okay.
the consent. Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
take care of them and then move on to consent.
Okay.
Item number one, you'll recall was deferred at the last time we met. That's the 902 North 8th Street. We will hear that application tonight. Item number two, 1922 North 22nd Street. It's a COA to construct an addition and alter the character defining facade. We would recommend that for consent if there are no concerns.
Are there any concerns? Do we want to hear that or ask any questions right now? It sounds
Okay.
like we can move that to
Super.
consent.
And then item number three at 2016 North 17th Street. Again, an addition and some alterations to character defining facade. We believe we will need to hear that one. I think we'll have a member of the public.
All right.
And on that note, as I mentioned, we do need to conduct elections. So would look for nominations and a vote on both the chair and vice chair positions.
All right. Do we have nominations?
I motion that Julian Roney for chair.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Any protests, any discussion?
Any protests? I can leave the room. Are we sure nobody else wants to do it? Because I'm happy to step aside. Okay. So do we call the,
Yeah, just go ahead and call a vote. Yeah,
we call
absolutely.
a vote, please, clerk?
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Aye.
Sales. All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. It sounds like we need the same thing for the vice chair, a nomination and a second.
I motion Jeffrey Parks for vice chair.
Ooh,
I'll second.
all right. Do we have any protest?
Protest, no, assuming that Commissioner Montoto is,
I have served my time as both chairs, so I am happy to allow you to take that seat.
very good. Big shoes to fill.
All right, clerk, can you please call the vote?
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens. Aye. Sales. All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we'll get started here in about 10 minutes.
Sounds good. All right, it is 6 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to everybody in the room and everybody online. We are citizen volunteers appointed by the mayor and approved by city council. We make final decisions on the certificate of appropriateness applications. Any decisions made tonight may be appealed to the city council, provided that the appeal is filed within 10 days of this hearing. In order to file an appeal, you must have given written or oral testimony at tonight's meeting. So that's why it's important to give your name and address when you testify tonight. We utilize a consent agenda. This means that if the applicant agrees with the staff report and there is no public opposition, then the item will be placed on the consent agenda. All items that are placed on the consent agenda are approved with one motion without further public comment. For items not on the consent agenda, we will hold a full public hearing in the order that we're going to detail in just a few minutes. We'll have the staff go first, the applicant will talk, the neighborhood association, and then the public testimony. Thank you for attending tonight. Will the clerk please call roll?
Maroney,
Here.
Montoto,
Here.
Malloy,
Here.
Otter, Parks,
Here.
Owens,
Here.
Sales,
Here.
6 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. And let's start tonight with approving the minutes from the August 28th work session and also the meeting, and then the November 27th work session and meeting. If I can get a motion.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Montoto.
I move to approve the minutes from both the August 28th, 2023 hearings and November 27th, 2023.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks. Clerk, please call roll.
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Madam Chair, do I need to abstain from the vote since I wasn't here?
Usually we have people abstain if they're not here.
I'm going to abstain from this vote. Thank you.
okay, Sales.
Abstain.
Okay,
Excellent. Thank
all in
you.
favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And then we have a couple of items that are not for public comment, but just to review quick. And so if we can get motions on item A, which is DRH 23-00292, revised finding at 2707 West Heron Street. It was a denial of certificate of appropriateness to change the status of an existing single-family home from contributing to non-contributing on a property in a single-family residential with historic overlay zone. And so I just need a motion and a second for this one.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Montoto.
I move to approve the findings for DRH 23-00292.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. If we could please get the roll on that, clerk.
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Abstain?
Sales.
Abstain.
4 in favor, 2 abstain, motion carries.
Thank you. And then the same for item number B, DRH 23-00299, revised findings at 2207 North 18th Street, approval of certificate of appropriateness to demolish an existing non-contributing structure and construct 2 new single-family residences and detached garages with ADUs above on substandard lots of record on property in a single-family residential with historic overlay zone.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Montoto.
I move to approve the findings for item DRH 23-00299.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Clerk, please call the roll.
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Abstain?
Sales.
Abstain.
4 in favor, 2 abstain, motion carries.
Thank you. And then we have one item to move on to the consent agenda without objection is item number 2, DRH 23-00356. Can we get a motion for the consent agenda? Oh, sorry.
Madam Chair, if we can get, ask the
Oh,
applicant.
I'm so sorry.
You know the routine.
Yes, I'm like in our moving through. Okay, so item DRH 23-00356, which is item number 2 on our agenda. It's at 1922 North 22nd Street, a certificate of appropriateness construct an addition and alter the character defining facade of a contributing structure on a property in a single-family residential with historic overlay zone. Is the applicant here?
Merlin Stark.
Thank you, Merlin. Are you in agreement with the terms and conditions of the staff report?
I am.
Excellent. Is there anyone present to testify in opposition today on this project? Nobody present in person online? No? Okay, seeing no hands raised, we'll place this on the consent agenda and then we'll need a motion to accept it. Oh, okay. So I'll move to accept this consent agenda that has the one item on it tonight.
Madam Chair, I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Montoto. Please call the roll.
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Aye.
Sales.
Aye.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. So with that, we will move on to our remaining items tonight. The first one before us is DRH 23-00329. This was deferred from our November 27th meeting. It's at 902 North 8th Street, a certificate of appropriateness to construct a new 3-story office building with below-grade parking on a property in an R-OHD-DA, which is residential office with historic design review, overlay, and development agreement zone. Staff, can we please get the report?
I can, and since the last meeting, there's been some correspondence with the applicant, and they have provided additional information and responses to the what was spoken of at for them to look into when it was deferred at the last meeting. So we'll see that. I'll scroll through that. They also provided some additional drawings and other information to give us a sense of relationships to other things. Just for example, is the relationship or the look of the previously, this had an older DRH 19 something, a previous approval from a different applicant to build a building, and they wanted to show the comparison of what that looked like versus what they are these new applicants have proposed this time. So they provided those drawings to give us a sense of the space. They also provide us some silhouette drawings of the elevations and a series of the silhouettes of other buildings in the vicinity to give a sense of massing and how the Chancery and the Center compares to outlying buildings in as far as width and height goes, and where that variation does lie.
Thank you.
And that this is just the letter stating what happened. And this is the letter from the council for the applicant with the added letter, form letter that gives answers to the questions or the requests that were brought up at the deferral. And it goes through that in detail. And they will speak more to their answers, and we'll take questions about that. And here's a few more additional renderings just to give a sense of the size of the cathedral and then the building itself and other buildings in the immediate vicinity. Sort of a Google Earth view with the rendering put in to give a sense of scale and perspective of nearby buildings. And this is further information from the architect. And this is the North End Neighborhood Association letter from the 8th with issues and concerns that they had raised about this and things that are more related to the P&Z meeting. So there may be some things brought up at this meeting that are things that are really under consideration for the P&Z, such as the height reduction, modification of the development agreement, parking reduction, I meant to say, parking reduction. So those kinds of things are really should be concentrated on at that meeting and aren't part of the consideration for this evening. And then now it's just to scroll back through the original report that was produced for the first meeting, showing the site plan, the landscape, all the different floor plans in the first, second, and third floor, and the elevations. These show the materials that, as I stated in my last report, are mimicking materials or using materials that are found in other locations, local sandstone, brick, a traditional palette of materials, and some more perspectives. And the photographs giving a context of the area that it's in as well. And as per the last time, the guidelines stated that a new building site should have a similar front heights similar to contributing buildings or adjacent sites and the block. And within a block of this building are a substantially taller apartment tower and the cathedral, and there's a few other buildings within that vicinity. The Madison Forum is larger than the immediately adjacent properties, but as stated, there are other properties that, where in the near vicinity that are substantially larger. It's using the brick and sandstone, which are traditional. And it's having the parapet wall to read more like a commercial building as it is, or commercial office building. And also having the sloped roof behind is sort of mimicking the look of the residential in the area. And the curtain wall system and that little, where you enter at the corner has sort of a contemporary feel to it, but it blends nicely with the overall design staff felt. And it does the very important thing of contrasting a new construction as new construction while still being compatible with the historic buildings in the area by using similar materials and massing. And yes, the rustication and the sandstone from the first floor to the second floor creates a desirable visual division between the lower and upper floors. And both 8th and 4th Street are currently improved with vertical curb, gutter, and sidewalk abutting the alley, et cetera. And the site is providing 50 total parking spaces, 33 in the garage and 17 in surface, where 49 are required, and et cetera, et cetera. And with that, I will stand for questions. As staff does recommend approval, we maintained our recommendation from the last hearing.
Thank you. Are there questions? I have a couple quick questions. Can you go back to the one with all the picture with the silhouettes?
Okay. Whoa. Is that me?
Thank you. So on this, it's saying that the height is 57 feet. What is the height on it, the max height?
The max height, the architect can maybe point to the exact number because I don't know that it shows on the drawing,
Right.
but it does show, it shows parapet heights, but they can confirm that because as you can see, those are the heights to the parapet, but to what the actual peak is, that can be a question to them.
Okay, but the actual peak is higher than that.
Yeah, well, yeah, sure. That height shown there is that parapet running there, and there's that parapet there that is taller, and then the peak and
Right.
the peaks of the roof are higher than that.
Okay, and then my other question, can you put it up with the project that was approved to be there before the side-by-side?
The
Right.
graphical or the
Yes, that one.
elevations? Okay.
Right, and I believe that the project that was approved to be there before, the height was, it's somewhere in our packet, like 44, 46, right? And so I think the scale of, yeah, I can't read
Is that
that.
readable?
It's like moving on my screen, so I don't know.
That's-
So I just like that rendering on the other one, I think the scale was a little off because I know they look the same, but I'm pretty sure it's shorter than this project. Those were my two questions.
Okay, yeah, and I can't recall what the height difference was and how much taller or shorter the first building was. It is 1 story lower, being a 3-story versus 4 stories, but yeah, it does seem that I think it was about the same height, at least a parapet.
Okay.
Or pretty within a
Thank
few feet.
you. Are there other questions? Nope, and right now, all right, thank you. So now we'll hear from the applicant. If you can step forward and state your name and address, please.
If you wouldn't mind, could I get the presentation up first
Mhm.
before we start the time? Thank you. Great, thank you. Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Deborah Nelson. My address is 601 West Bannock Street here in Boise. And I'm here representing the applicant team. Also with me are members of the diocese and other members of our applicant team, including the project architect, Lombard Conrad. And we're all available to answer your questions this evening.
Thank you.
So following the November 27th hearing, the commission requested the applicant work on improving the overall massing, design, and height of the building so that it meets the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation 9 and 10. the North End Historic District guidelines, the Hayes Street Historic District guidelines, and to comply with the city's preservation plan. So we want to address each of those things with you this evening. We did provide a detailed written letter, as staff has mentioned, to address each of these as well. And we have met with the North End Neighborhood Association to discuss the project since that hearing. The applicant remains in agreement with the staff report, which recommends approval of the certificate of appropriateness. And so we'd like to highlight just a few of the points of why and how we think we're compatible with the standards that are in those guidelines and your concerns regarding massing and height in particular. So starting with the Secretary of Interior standards, number 9 and 10, neither of these is directly applicable here because these standards really do not contemplate development on vacant properties. And so the standards relate to how a new structure or an addition to a structure relates to a remaining historic building that is still on that site. But in any event, the project does comply with the general vision that's stated there by having a building that is both differentiated from the old and compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features of other buildings in the area. Similarly, the city's historic preservation plan from 1979 is really an administrative plan. This is the plan that told the city how to go about adopting the ordinances that control and using design guidelines. But in any event, the project does comply with the general goals of the plan to the extent you can pull out standards from it. For example, the most applicable seems to be Goal 2, Policy 2.3, which is directing the city's ordinance to include provisions that facilitate historic preservation and preserve urban quality. And that's what this project does, which we'll walk through more this evening. Now, the design guidelines do provide more applicable and very detailed standards, and that's why we spend a fair amount of time going through a lot of those detailed standards in our written letter to you. And in particular, there's the 3 chapters, which I know you're all aware of, dealing with each of the historic districts that are at issue here, as well as Chapter 5 for new construction. So the project, you can see just the tiny little yellow star there in each. The project is located just inside the North End Historic District and just across the street from the Hayes Street Historical District. Both of these districts recognize that they have diverse architectural styles, diverse sizes of buildings and uses that exist now. And both of these district policies call for new construction to enhance and reinforce that diversity. In fact, keeping diversity is the key directive. The North End guidelines state this strongly in the quote that I've included here, saying that the diversity in the size and the architectural style of buildings is what gives the North End its character and vitality. The new construction standards in Chapter 5 repeat this directive, stating it's preferable to design congruous contemporary structures rather than duplicate or mimic the design of historic buildings in the district. And the Chancery Building really strives to strike that balance here. It isn't a replica of St. John's Cathedral or other historic buildings in the area, but it does seek to be congruous through some architectural features and roof lines and materials. As I noted, the design guidelines do include numerous specific standards regarding the building orientation on the site, the streetscape improvements, the solid to void ratios, energy efficiencies, materials, and we went through each of those in detail in the letter. I'm going to highlight a few here tonight and focus on the massing and height. So to look at what is in the area, we've assembled some photographs just to walk through this, and then we'll go into the scale images. So starting with the immediate surrounding, here we have a good showing of the architectural diversity in the area on the northwest corner at 8th and Fort. You've got this strip triangle commercial building. That's the top image along Fort Street on the left, and the top image on the right is along 8th Street. Behind that, of course, is the Boise Co-op, the ranch-style building. On the east side of 8th Street, north of the project site, are the box-shaped brick apartment buildings and a house-like office that are shown here on the lower right. Immediately east of the site, along the north side of Fort Street, is the 7-story Capitol Plaza apartment building and associated parking. You can see the front and back sides here. And 1 block from the project site to the east is the James A. McClure Federal Building and Courthouse, an architecturally significant building in a 1960s modernist style. And in between those 2 large buildings are, along the north side of Fort Street, are a few single-family residences in a variety of ages and styles. Truly variety on this street. To the southwest, you can see the historic Romanesque Revival style St. John's Cathedral and the St. Joe's School building that runs the entire block of the south side of Fort Street. And on the southeast corner, there's a fuel and convenience store, which is adjacent to the Lutheran Church on the south side of Fort Street. To the south along 8th Street, the main approach to the building from downtown, there's a variety of office buildings along the west side. These are mostly contemporary and range up to 4 stories. And on the east side of 8th Street are older 2- and 3-story residential apartments, with an example shown there in the lower right. The project design balances and reflects the diverse building sizes and architectural styles in the area. It's consistent with Chapter 5's directive to be congruous, but not to mimic the design of the historic buildings. The project features architectural details and materials that blend with the structures dating to the period of significance of the neighborhood, as well as the larger, more contemporary office buildings. The design mirrors some characteristics of the historic St. John's Cathedral, with locally sourced sandstone and brick masonry, and similarly peaked roof that's back behind the parapet. Similar to both the historic buildings and the contemporary buildings in the district, the project was designed with a sandstone base and transitions to smaller scale brick masonry at the upper stories. The window openings suggest a similar rhythm and incorporate stone lintels and sills that are common in historic masonry construction and also reflective of the contemporary office buildings. The building height is also consistent with and mid-range of other buildings in the vicinity. The highest point of the building is 62 feet 7 inches at the roof peak, which is interior to the site, and the building steps down in height from that peak to all sides, including from street view, is 44 feet 8 inches to the predominant parapet. At the back, the building steps down to 1 story in height around an interior courtyard. This is the nearest point that is adjacent to any single-family property, which is actually owned by the diocese and used to house priests. So there is no other adjacent single-family property. The project design incorporates variation in both horizontal and vertical planes to provide shadow relief and design interest compatible with the architectural character of the historic district. In this diagram, with the building elevations of significant area buildings, you can see the variation in height and massing. The chancery that's shown in the middle here is approximately within the range of surrounding buildings. And Chair Maroney, I believe you asked about that. That is indicating 67 feet, consistent with the roof peak.
Thank you. It's reading as 57 on.
Oh, excuse me, I stand corrected by the architect in my bad eyes. Apparently that is design, that is 57, then consistent with the parapet as staff answered.
Thank you.
I shouldn't have corrected them. But I guess regardless even of what that is showing, that is the street view, and that is within the range of the other buildings in the area, including the Capitol Plaza apartments immediately to the east and to the right on this picture, and the federal building. Similarly, in the ground plan with these footprints of the area buildings, you can see the variation in size and massing. The chancery is appropriately within the range of the surrounding buildings and consistent with the solid to void relationships in the area. The commercial businesses on the northwest corner are attached without modulation for a length of 190 feet along Fort Street and 120 feet along North 8th Street. St. Joe's School on the southwest corner is a single large building stretching 300 feet along Fort Street and 120 feet along North 8th Street. The project's facade has a smaller scale than both those northwest and southwest corners, with 99 feet along Fort Street and 86 feet along North 8th Street, with modulation 5 feet in depth to break up that facade into smaller masses, consistent with the design guidelines policies. The aerial photo shows the proposed building in its current context. To the east, you can see the 7-story, 73-foot tall Capitol Plaza apartment building and the 6-story, 103-foot tall federal courthouse. North of the site is the 3-story brick apartment building. South along North 8th Street includes the 81-foot tall St. John's Cathedral and several office buildings, including a 3-story office building at Franklin and North 8th Street and a 4-story office building at Washington and North 8th Street. So again, the letter we submitted goes in more detail about each of these policies. We've just summarized a few of them here, including to note the policies that address the buildings being in similar scale, materials, solid void relationships, but with architectural detail to break that up. And the project will also significantly improve the streetscape to make it more visually appealing, pedestrian friendly, and improve the street canopy in the area. The project meets policy 5.12 that requires minimizing solar impacts on adjacent properties with roof step backs on the north side. And it maintains all prevailing setbacks. I think there's been some question about that. The building adheres to all of the requirements in the code. And the front door is positioned on the front facade, forming a corner entry at the intersection of 8th and Fort, also as called for in your guidelines. We also have energy conservation, and the building is geothermal ready. You can see a lot of that reflected here of those policies with the careful attention to design with the facade breakup, the orientation of the door, the relationship with the streetscape, really providing a nice entry to the entire area of the north end and creating that passage from down from the commercial downtown oriented area through the Hayes Street district, which is a mix of uses, including a lot of office along this strip, into the north end in a welcoming way. So as was noted and discussed already a little bit by staff, the site was previously approved for this 4-story mixed-use residential, the Metro. The project was never built, and the proposed Chancery building is similar in massing and size to what was previously approved. Chair Maroney, you asked about this as well. This is the same scale that was used, and again, I'll let the architects address any details about that, about how this was created. And the facade is what is aligned with the facade on the other building. And so it does show that the roof peak extends above higher than the Metro, but the scale is very comparable. And from the street, it is consistent with what was approved here before. And again, you can see that again here in the rendered images of that. From the parapet, we've got a similar scale here to what was approved. But you've got just the roof peak that you cannot see from the street view in front of the building behind it. And that's purposeful to have that stretch back from the street, but also to mirror the design of buildings in the area. You can also see the lovely materials here that are included and exhibited here, where you've got the locally sourced sandstone and brick masonry with some consistency with the buildings in the area. So before I wrap up, I do want to just address a few comments we've heard. Appreciate staff's comments that there are a number of issues about this building that are part of the process before the city, but not necessarily before this commission. We have heard a number of public comments and in our meetings with the North End Neighborhood Association, and certainly in reviewing their Facebook page and their comments. There does seem to be some misunderstandings about the use, and while the bulk of that will be addressed about the use in the before the Planning Commission, and any issues related to the development agreement will be addressed by the council, there's a few facts that we thought might be at least worth clarifying just for your understanding so that, especially as they might relate to massing and scale, that you understand that what the building is before you. So just to clarify a little bit of misinformation, office is an allowed use in the zone and we're not seeking any rezone. The applicant is only seeking a conditional use permit for height and for a small parking reduction. There is a parking agreement adjacent to the property on the surface parking that the diocese owns. We are not seeking approval, nor is the building contemplating any assembly use here. In fact, the largest conference room is 1356 square feet. It only holds up to 90 people. So again, that's for the Planning Commission to understand, but I think that context is important, that this truly is being presented as an office use. It is not presented as assembly space as has been criticized. It is not providing any assembly space for the church or the school either. They have their own auditoriums and gymnasiums and gathering spaces already. So with that, we'd ask for your approval of the certificate of appropriateness. We thank you for listening and for reading the additional materials we put into the record. I know that added a lot of additional narrative to digest, and we appreciate that. We're trying to be responsive of your request to show how we're compliant with these plans and your guidelines. And I'm available to answer any questions, as is our applicant team here. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair, I have a quick question. What is your background?
My background personally?
Yeah, are you an architectural historian?
No, I'm not. I'm a land use attorney.
Okay.
Yes.
Madam Chair. Thank you for your thorough presentation and all the materials that you provided in advance. That was very helpful. I appreciate that. Obviously, height, I think, has been kind of an issue or sticking point. Can you speak to, obviously, there's a conscientious design decision to make a sloped roof on the building. Is that serving a function?
Chair, Commissioner Parks, I might let the architect address that if I can, just
Sure.
what their thinking was in their design.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and if you can just state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Jared Schmidt, 13486 North 4th Avenue. To address your question in regards to the roof, it is serving a purpose. It's to hold the mechanical units up for the building. So it's to hide, and then the slope also is complying with the guidelines required in this district.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair, I think my question will probably also be for your
Okay,
architect.
we'll stay up here.
Sorry, make you run back and forth. It is a little bit more of a technical question. I don't know if you have anything in front of you to check it, but I was wondering, at this primary facade here that does this little diagonal kitty corner, what is the width of that, if you know that?
I'm sorry, I don't know that offhand.
Okay, no worries. Do you have any details on the high level of transparency that's provided on this front facade and what the reasoning, if you have any reasoning for that, was?
For that corner entry, is
Mhm.
that what you're referring
Yeah,
to?
up higher specifically.
Yeah, no, it just serves as the main entry point for the building. So to identify the entry into the building and to add some transparency for staff inside. There's some workrooms and some open space so they could see out into that intersection.
Okay. It appears to me that this looks in on stairwells. Are stairwells in front of those office spaces to the rear?
Yeah, no, there's an open staircase you're seeing exactly right there. And so that's kind of that open space. So on the second floor, there's an open area for staff to mingle. There'll be some chairs in there.
Yeah.
And then up on the third floor is a balcony space to look down kind of into that open area.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? I guess my question is why is it so tall? If the one before this was approved and it was 4 stories and it's the same height as this, like why does this need to be so tall if it's 3 stories?
I guess it's just to open up well, open up really all the floors. It's to add some modulation and interest rather than just having low ceilings like in a multifamily apartment building. They can have lower ceilings. This opens it up a little bit more, and the mechanical systems are also different in these types of commercial office buildings rather than like a residential building.
How high are the ceilings?
I don't know. I can't remember offhand what the ceiling heights are, but I think they're somewhere between probably 10 to 12 feet.
Okay.
And there, the first floor is a little bit taller, as we typically do. And a lot of buildings have a first floor that's taller,
Mhm.
just to provide an entry and openness into the building. And so that's intended on the first floor. And then the rest of the floors are a little lower.
Okay, thank you. All right, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a representative from the Neighborhood Association wanting to testify on this project? Your name and address, please.
Sure. Sandra Herman, 1404 North 7th Street. Madam Chair and Commissioners. The applicant has taken time to emphasize every large building in the immediate neighborhood and justification for the extreme massing of their project. But they did not mention in their letter the one-story residence that is currently, I think, a law office, as their immediate neighbor, and how their structure will loom over every other historic and historic building on the residential block. We feel it is important for the nearby church and cathedral to remain prominent in the landscape and not compete with this overly large event center and office building. Cunningham Place apartment building at Capitol Plaza offers the community 7 floors of desperately needed low-income housing. But it is important to point out that this structure was built before the existence of the historic district and would likely not have been approved today. The proposed event center and office building tops out at 65 feet. I think maybe they said 64 just now. I'm not quite sure on that. And that's just 8 feet shy of Cunningham Place, which is 73 feet. But this project only offers 3 stories of event and office space. We feel the height is unnecessary, and we think the building should reflect the more human proportion and scale of the immediate buildings, including the co-op and strip mall, school, and nearby residences. We think this could possibly be achieved by lowering the height of each of the 3 floors and eliminating the tower and overly large pitched roof. These top features on the proposed building will be obvious, especially coming northbound down 8th Street from downtown, and will shadow and hide the rest of the historic residents on that block. The federal courthouse is not in the historic district, and both it and the apartment tower are set far back from the road. The proposed building sits right along both the busy 8th and 4th Street sidewalks. Modern offices tend to be more compact, and we very much believe that room for 35 employees could be accommodated in far less square footage and in a more efficient floor plan. We wonder about the relevant lifespan of this building, particularly when so much commercial office space is available right now. In cities across the country, people are trying to puzzle out the difficult task of refitting commercial buildings with residential use. We've seen this use flip in many of the house structures close to downtown in our own city. Given the investment in stone material for this building, we'd like to see a design that endeavors to endure and is worthy of the use of the traditional non-renewable resource stone. We are also concerned the south-facing glass tower entrance represents energy waste and is not in line with the city environmental efficiency objectives. We would like to see solar power used on any building of this size, down-shielded lighting, permeable paving, and bicycle parking. And I did hear that they were mentioning that this was geothermal ready. I think we'd like to know more about that. We continue to be concerned about parking. Per building code section 11-3-4.20, the request must comply with the dimensional standards of other applicable requirements of Title 11 zoning ordinance, including but not limited to setbacks, height restriction, and parking requirements. Because of this, we feel that parking can be addressed as an issue in front of this commission. The applicant has stated that they can utilize and annex parking at nearby Catholic properties. We note that these parking lots are already highly utilized by church and the school all week long, including the large parking lot that does double duty as a playground Monday through Friday. The teacher's parking lot at North and Fort is so jam-packed, every teacher must back in park in order for them all to get in and out. We are not certain, but it appears that the parking behind the parish house across the alley from the project are being counted as part of the parking spaces for this project. At least 4 of those spaces are utilized nearly 100% of the time. This is an incredibly, I have more. At various parts of the day and week, for blocks around the Cathedral Complex neighborhood, on-street parking is taken up for school events, school pickup and drop off, services, and events like weddings, funerals, and quinceañeras. Boise High School is also nearby, as are small and large commercial buildings and many multifamily house units, including those on the proposed block. They all already heavily utilize on-street parking. We highly doubt that the new event center and office complex will be able to schedule around all of these uses already in the neighborhood. The proposed parking is simply inadequate for the first floor event space. We have questioned the use of the main floor of the building and are concerned about how often it will be used and by how many people. We don't feel we have received clarifying answers about this issue. We wondered whether the event center space will be rented to parishioners, how often outside vendors like caterers and florists will be up and down this residential alley, and what kind of events will occur, taking into consideration late night noise and traffic for nearby residents. When we asked about these concerns, we were told the first floor would be used for an annual dinner. We find it unlikely that an expensive space such as this that looks like it could hold events for over 200 people on the main floor and a maximum building capacity of 400 would be used this infrequently. We also worry that though the intent may not to be to rent this venue out frequently now, once the building is built, we will have no recourse if the policy changes. We spoke to ACHD and they said they were only evaluating the building based on 35% office space and not the event space. They also did not consider the planned bike route because it is officially not scheduled for construction for 2 more years. The bike route would eliminate parking on one side of 8th Street and add the bike lane. 8th Street would go from 2 lanes down to 1. When ACHD proposed this project, there was much pushback from the church and school community because they had issues with losing the parking. We appreciate what the investment of the native sandstone represents in time and permanence of structure. We understand that the architect is notably proud of their design. They have stated that this will not be fast construction. We'd like to know the time frame for building this project and whether the construction workers will be allowed to utilize the annexed parking at the church properties. This heavy construction will obviously and necessarily create traffic issues at such a compact building site and a busy part of the city. This is an incredibly important piece of property. It is the gateway to the north end. As a historic neighborhood association, we are constantly challenged to look forward, not to the past, and not just stand defiantly against every project. We endeavor to always be thoughtful and measured with our opinions. There is no doubt this project will have a much larger impact than the normal residential projects we assess. Our neighbors count on us to help guide and protect the community when change happens in the neighborhood. We find it extremely disheartening that the diocese has chosen to hide behind third parties and have made it clear that they don't need our permission and are not interested in our opinion. This is such a stark contrast to large local projects like Longfellow School and the YMCA, who presented at NENA meetings months, if not years in advance of their commencement. They are very productive conversations to the mutual benefit of all and the foundation of great neighborly relationships. As people sit at the traffic lights at 8th and Hayes and 8th and Fort, whether by foot or bike or vehicle? Will they understand they are moving into a historic neighborhood? Or will it look like they are at the beginnings of a commercial office park? I don't know. But I do know this project deserves our attention to slow down and get it right. And our NINA president would like to have a few words, our remaining time.
Thank you. And if you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Eric Hagan. I live at 809 North 18th Street. I'm the North End Neighborhood Association President and the Planning and Zoning Chair. Thank you, Sandy, for putting that all together. We're all volunteers, so we're just literally just throwing stuff together as we can get to it. I just threw this together an hour ago as I was on my way over here from work. The property was originally zoned R2 residential. It was changed to RO under a development agreement and a zoning classification change. The zoning classification change came with a development agreement in order to change the use of the property. The development agreement has specific language in there that says if the developer shall not follow through on his obligations of the development agreement, the property shall revert back to R2. I'm mentioning this because of the differences between R2 and RO. R2 does go to the north. The properties that are being proposed to use do attach to them. The small residence / office that is C, the little strip of pink there, is it is commercial. I'm not quite sure why that one lot is commercial, but the lot in question was R2 originally. So one of the things that we're looking at here is what's the use of this space, and there's been a lot of discussion about it. The floor plans, if you've looked at them, the ground floor shows a lot of assembly space, and you can't get away from the word assembly in this. As licensed professionals, we are required to follow the building code, the zoning codes. The building official, the planning officials, zoning officials are supposed to as well. And when we look at a project and we're trying to do a code review of it, be it zoning or building, we apply the worst case scenario. What can this space be used as? And when you look at the ground floor of this building, it has a 50-person classroom. It has a 90-person lecture hall. It has another gathering space for about 200 people. It all adds up to almost 400 seats on the ground floor. It would be a shame if that was never used, but it would also be very difficult on the neighborhood if it was used to that capacity. I take the applicant's word that it's not going to be used at that. But again, like I said, when we're looking at these things from a code perspective, we're supposed to apply the worst case scenario to this. The dimensional restrictions on this property, if it was R2, would have been limited to 35 feet in height. If it was RO, which it is, and we're under the old code, it is limited to 35 to 45 feet unless you're adjacent to an R1 property. And it also says at the bottom, I've highlighted it, or any existing single family home. It doesn't state that has to be residential, it just says single family home. The property to the north, directly to the north, is a single family residence structure. It was a single family home. It's now commercial. But as we know, that could change back to residential at any time. All the rest of the buildings on the block to the north and to the east are residential. There's been a lot of talk about using Capitol Plaza as an example. Again, like Sandy said, it's been set back really, really far. The new code that does not apply here is something I think we should consider, because as we're looking at parking requirements, the new code is being referenced in a reduction requirement. So the building height under the new code is 45 feet as well for an MX1, which is what the property is now currently zoned as. The uses are conditional. I've highlighted religious institution and uses related to and operated by a religious institution. That's the same under the existing code, the new code, or the old code. That should be something that should be addressed in the conditional use permit at next week's planning and zoning hearing, but it does affect this project here tonight. Just some snippets straight from the code as to what the MX1 district is and also what the residential office district is. And it's looking for, just as the development agreement was that was approved for the residential project, a mix of uses. The office use, while being an allowed use, is a singular use. This project is not providing any mix of uses. Getting back to the zoning portion of the property, Fort Street is kind of a dividing line, and this project is literally across the line into a residential district or a lower elevation commercial district with single story and 2-story buildings. This building at 45 feet to the parapet, 63 feet to the top of the roof, far exceeds that. The parking is an interesting one. 35 people in 24,000 square feet. That's a massive amount of area for 35 office workers. When we're looking at the occupancy and the parking requirements for a project such as this, we have to apply all the uses in the building. Even if we apply just office uses, which is 1 stall per 300 square feet, I get 70 stalls are required. I'm not quite sure where the planning department is getting 49 out of there, but when you take 24,000 divided by 300, you're getting closer to 70 stalls. That aside, once you apply the uses, the other uses of the property as they are defined in the building code, conference rooms, lecture halls, classrooms, gathering commons, all that stuff adds up. And the zoning code, both the old code and the new code, have these uses in the parking calculations. Why they're being ignored? You can't just go off of what somebody says the building is going to be used as. We're supposed to look at what is the most restrictive use of this building. If we take that all into account, I get a parking calculation of 73 stalls for the ground floor alone, 24 and 27 stalls for the second and third floor. That adds up to 124 stalls that would be required. If we're dealing with a building this massive and we're just going to shove in 34 stalls in the ground, in the underneath, that's not going to meet the requirements of this building or the needs of this building, what's going to happen to the rest of the neighborhood? How do we actually address that? Is it something that can be added back into the project that would add more height, more mass to the structure? I don't know. We tried to talk to the architect about this, and we had a meeting, and we're ignored, I would say. I haven't seen a single one of our comments be addressed by the applicant or their representatives. We've had communications with owner representatives and with lawyers. I'd love to be able to have that kind of firepower behind me. But like I said, we're a volunteer organization trying to represent what the neighborhood is looking for. As is in your capacity as commissioners, you can approve this project with conditions. Other projects in the neighborhood, like the Trica project, have been approved with conditions. Typically, those are assigned to the conditional use permit. In the case of this project, we won't get there unless we get through design review here. So I think it would be worthwhile for you guys to consider applying conditions to this project that would apply and have to be adhered to in the design, in the conditional use, and in the development agreement modification. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for either of the NINA representatives?
Madam Chair, I have a question for Mr. Hagan.
Commissioner Montoto?
Eric, you mentioned that there is language in the development agreement where certain uses would revert the zone back to R2. Do you, or I guess staff, have a copy of the DA
It should be in your packet, but I can recite it here. I
that we
have
could
it.
just pull up really quickly?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if you'll give us a moment, we can pull up a copy of that DA. The language that Mr. Hagan is referring to is standard language in any development agreement that says that if the agreement is defaulted, it will revert to the former zone. That is absolutely accurate. Our stance is consistently that modifying the development agreement is not defaulting. The applicant has the ability to go to council and modify that agreement, and they are doing so through the proper process. So in our opinion, and that of our director and our legal team, is this is not a default of the development agreement.
Thanks, Josh, for clarifying that. And can I ask a follow-up question, Josh? Can you confirm the parking numbers against Mr. Hagan's calculation of 124 total?
Madam Chair, members of the commission. So we do not use additive parking calculations. The parking calculation is the primary use, which is office. The applicant is requesting a parking reduction in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. They will consider that parking reduction. I can pull up the Planning and Zoning Commission report, see what those exact numbers are, but that is the subject of that hearing at Planning and Zoning.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I also have a question for Josh. So they have to go in front of planning and zoning for a variance, a height variance of 45, above 45 feet?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Malloy, it's actually a conditional use permit for a height exception, but yeah, essentially a variance to the height. Yes.
Okay, and just for clarification, why do they go in front of planning and zoning before they come to us for design review?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Malloy, they actually don't. They've been to this body before P&Z.
Mhm.
Sorry, reverse that. Why do they go to us first, then P&Z?
The traditional approach has always been to place historic preservation's approval first. I think you can debate the merits of that, but that is how it has been done in the city of Boise for the last decade, at least.
So if we do what the North End would like and put a cap on the height, then the P&Z would have to approve that cap?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Malloy, so what would happen is they would have to come back to you and modify their certificate of appropriateness. So if this body approved a certificate of appropriateness at a certain height, it went to Planning and Zoning Commission, that height exception was not approved. They cannot build to that height, and they would have to come back and modify their certificate of appropriateness.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Nina? None? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I will now go to the sign up sheet. Eric Hagan, I have you signed up. Perfect. Is there anybody else present in person or online that's wishing to testify either in support or opposition of this project? Anybody online?
Madam Chair, we do have a member of the public online, but their hand is not raised.
Okay. Well, hearing none, hand is raised. Oh, excellent. If you would like to testify on this project, please state your name and address for the record. Can you hear me online?
Yeah, are you seeing my hand? Okay. I
Yes.
see I'm there.
Excellent. Thank you, Ms. Veit.
Okay, yes, I just like to say this is a very complicated project, just listening to all the potential elements of it and where it may not comply with various parts of the code, which others understand far better than me. But I really want to reiterate what the.
Can I
NEPA
pause you for just a second and get your name and address
Oh,
for our record?
Okay.
Thank you.
Katie Fight, 1006 North Fifth Street, Boise, 83702.
Thank you.
Okay, what the Nina spokeswoman discussed about this being the gateway, what people view as one of the primary gateways, if not the gateway to the north end, where you kind of start relaxing after you've been in the hectic downtown area. This building just juts out close to the street with this facade, the big glass structure with the cross embedded in it very visibly, that clashes with the residential character of the historic district of the North End. This building seems to have no historical anchoring, if that's an architectural term that can be used, with the North End. The neighborhood association already covered how the taller structure, the apartment building, is set way back from the street. And I want to make a comment about the Conrad Lombard drawings and renderings, where they don't really portray what this is really like. This is a closed in, fairly tight intersection space here. And their drawings don't really show, I don't believe, the right scale of the apartment buildings and everything else in this part of the world. And I just walked along 4th Street this evening. It looked to me like the tree space was like the widest we have in Boise. I believe that's 8 feet. But here it looks like, in at least the artist's drawings, it's a tiny, narrow tree space. So, I mean, there's so much that doesn't really seem to comport with the neighborhood. And the drawing that showed the courtyard, you know, the area would be more compatible if the courtyard was flipped, and where there's this imposing glass facade, we had like a courtyard space that would sort of ease people into, sort of ease the flashing view of this structure with its glass front. And I just have to, even though this isn't your province, have to get in a word for there should be bird-friendly glass in any building built in Boise, because bird collisions with buildings with all that glass are an increasingly recognized serious problem nationwide, and the City of Trees should do far better for its birds.
Thank you, Ms. Fight. Is that all?
Yeah, I thought I'd be out of time, but yes.
Yep,
That needs to go back to the drawing board.
Thank you. Is there anybody else present in person or online wishing to testify on this project? All right. Hearing none, we have a rebuttal by the applicant. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, members of the commission. So a few items to update based on questions and also, of course, comments that we've heard to respond to. The questions from before, the angle along the corner is 30 feet. And as to the height that was requested on the 2nd and 3rd floors, the interior ceiling height is 10 to 12 feet. And on the 1st floor, it is 10 to 14 feet, to provide those more specific answers for you. Also on the height, the front facade is under 45 feet. 57 feet is the midpoint of the roof, which is consistent with how the city of Boise measures the height of the building based on your definitions. And that's why 57 was used. And then 67 is the very peak of that roof point. There was comments about the one-story building immediately to the north of the project that was addressed in both our letter and shown in the presentation. This is currently used as an office. It's for a law firm, and it is zoned commercial. So it does not have the opportunity to be used for single-family residential. Of course, the historic use of our site also was non-residential with the long-standing Baird's Dry Cleaning there. And has already been discussed and answered by Josh. The development agreement that's there does run with the land. That's part of the property there. And the city does allow for modification of that to change the uses for new projects that come in, and then that binds the successors as well. There was a question about wanting to hear more about the mechanical system that's set up for geothermal. And so that the geothermal capability is part of additional infrastructure that has been added through that mechanical system, done at extra cost, not necessary otherwise, to be available if and when there is geothermal available to the site, to be able to take advantage of that and further fulfill some of the city's efficiency goals there. Parking is again part of the issue before the Planning Commission, not directly relevant to this body, but to answer the question that was asked, 67 is the number that is required under the code. 31 spaces are in the garage and 19 spaces are in the rear. 17 spaces are provided in the off-site surface parking lot directly across from St. John's Cathedral. The windows will have to comply with the city's energy code, of course, and these are insulated to meet appropriate standards. They do add architectural features to the exterior of the building and an amenity for the interior of the building, as the architect addressed before as well. The diocese has reached out to Nina for discussion on this, including before the last hearing and after the last hearing. So appreciate their willingness to engage and discuss, and the diocese remains open to continuing to do that. The facts are not in dispute from our perspective of, what the actual assembly spaces that they claim that we have. That tonight we heard that there was space for up to 200. That's just not correct. The largest room is designed to hold 90 people. And so, some of this is just making sure we have all the facts on the table. And so we're happy to keep meeting with them, make sure we're continuing to provide that information to them. And of course, that will come up at the Planning Commission hearing as well. And so, the diocese is trying to bring forward a space to house their 35 employees. This is a great location that provides great synergies for them and for the community. They aren't trying to bring forward a project that is not exactly as they presented. The design guidelines do call for the building to be oriented to the street, just responding to Katie's comment there. And this building does exactly that, as close as the setback allows, as is appropriate under your design guidelines. That's consistent with the non-residential buildings that are on the northwest and the southwest corners, and really create this non-residential corner here to fill that out, consistent with both the Hayes Street guidelines in that area and the North End Neighborhood Historic District guidelines. So with that, anything else to touch on? Appreciate, and we'd stand for any further questions you might have.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Chair Montoro.
I think there was just one thing that I didn't find was touched on. Can you go over the timeline for construction?
I'm going to let the architect team do that if they know.
Yeah, so to address your question about construction, we've kicked it around and tried to figure it out, but I mean, it kind of depends on this process. We'll have a couple months of design left to wrap up design, and then we'll go through permitting, and then we plan on starting construction shortly after that. So yeah, I mean, it can happen as soon as this process kind of gets through.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair, I have a question, I guess, maybe for the architect. I'm kind of a little confused after Mr. Hagan's testimony. Is the increased height related to the original use that was approved for the original residential project that was not built? Because it seems like if he's saying 45 feet and you're saying 67 feet, where does that come in?
Chair, Commissioner, maybe I could start with that and then.
Sure.
Because that sounds a little bit more like what's required or the regulatory nature of this, if I understand your question. So the the code, as Eric highlighted, allows 65 feet unless you are adjacent to a residential zone that's listed or an existing single-family residence as a use. And so, and then it comes down to 45 feet as the base unless you are able to achieve a height exception through a conditional use permit. And so the project here, the only adjacent, there is no adjacent residential zone that triggers that. So then you're just back to the use. The only adjacent single-family residence is that's owned by the diocese, and that is where the priests live. And so that home was there before, and yet the metro was not held to that same standard. Instead was held to the 65-foot standard, which we believe is also appropriate here, but staff has taken a different read on that house should trigger the 45 feet, and that's why we have applied for a conditional use permit for that. But it just shows that the range here is that between that 45 and 65. They were actually above 45 feet. They were not held to a 45-foot standard, nor did they meet that. So they were just above that. And so, and we also will be above that, and we're just checking a different box in the process to get that approved. Does that answer
It does.
your question? Okay.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Owens.
I guess my question is, how many offices are in here? Is it 35? Or is it more?
It is right about 35 because that's what we have. There's storage rooms up above, but yeah, there should be right about 35 office spaces in that building.
Okay, so you're thinking one office per person, essentially, was the plan for the structure.
Correct.
Okay.
There's some workstations too. Yeah, on the second and third floor too.
Okay, I guess as a further clarification, the 14-foot ceilings is just for comfort reasons for those offices?
The 14-foot ceilings are just on the first floor. So
Mhm.
that's where those are at. So you're talking your lobby space, your main hallways, and in the conference room too, because you've got, screens like in here that you have to have on the wall so you could see them and you have your view angles and everything. So that's to accommodate those screen heights in there. The upper floors are 10 to 12 feet. You've got 14-foot floor to floors. So you've got your mechanical and your structure in there that you're running across. And so that's kind of typical standard commercial construction.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? All right, thank you. Hearing none, we'll close the hearing and render a decision. Does anybody have a motion, or do we want to start with discussion?
I think we should start with discussion.
Let's start it off.
So we review a lot of different projects throughout all of our historic districts, and very rarely do we give height exceptions for these projects. And I think the last, according to their letter, the former project was 49 feet. I think we should stay consistent with our guidelines of 45 feet. So if we approve this, I would like to put a condition that it not exceed 45 feet.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Montoto.
I would support that.
All right. Any other discussion?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Parks.
however, I feel that the additional height is providing screening for mechanical equipment, which we wouldn't want to see in any case, whether or not they're putting it under a roof or some other rooftop screening mechanism, which would probably actually make it fall, the building would fall under the allowed height. So I feel that the additional height that the building is asking for to screen that rooftop equipment is a good use of that height. They're putting it under a slate roof, which is a tremendous expense, a tremendous weight. That roof will outlast grandchildren. And I feel that it is appropriate as is. As I've said before, I feel that the project overall strikes a nice balance between historic and contemporary. It is of this era, but not pretending to be historic, and overall is a good balance and transition from the urban core into the north end. And I would be in favor of height as proposed.
So you would not support a motion that had the height restriction?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. other comments or discussion?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Owen?
I think an area where I would think that there would be some reduction in height would be the higher ceilings on every floor. I think in residential, usually it's about 10 feet is what we see. So a 3-story building might be 35 to 40 maximum. Obviously, we've got architects and builders on our team here that can speak to that maybe slightly better. But generally speaking, I think the height is quite large for a 3-story building. I do support the screening of the mechanical equipment. It's something we like to see in pretty much every area that's downtown. So it's something I'm still supportive of, but I think there's other areas where that height could be reduced slightly and still provide that screening. I'm not an architect, so I can't go through and revise those plans myself, but it's something that I think I would be interested in seeing that height come down slightly and maintain the screening because I am supportive of it, as you mentioned.
Madam Chair, there is probably a little bit of room for give, but the floor to floors that as presented are fairly typical for commercial buildings, just based on the way they're built, the ductwork and fire suppression and that sort of thing that usually has to run through there. Residential construction typically runs more of like a 10-foot floor to floor, which is why the previous project was 4 floors instead of 3. But it's typically also wood frame construction and a whole other mechanical system and way of doing. So what I see in this proposal isn't all that far off, but perhaps there is a little bit of room for some reduction in that floor to floor.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Owens?
I'm going to speak quickly to another area that I thought there might be a little bit of wiggle room and something that I think makes, as one of our members of the public mentioned, on that front facade, one of the reasons I asked for the width is that one of the residential guidelines speaks towards minimizing the length of facades to make it seem like smaller structures that are more broken up with fenestration. And I think 30 feet is appropriate. It looks a lot larger in the renderings, but as we know, these renderings maybe aren't perfect, right? That's why they're renderings. I think the level of transparency on that front facade, especially because it's that primary facade, does make it seem really imposing. When we looked at the other, residential structure that was the point of comparison, there's a lot more breaking up. Like the solid to void ratio was a lot closer. I know generally we like to see high levels of transparency. I think in this case, seeing 3 floors of transparency almost makes it seem like very imposing and like a wall of glass up above you as you're walking in. I appreciate that at that pedestrian level, there is a bit of a breaking up of that facade area, but I think those 3 floors of glass is maybe a little bit of a sticking point for me. It does come across as really imposing to me, and I don't know if you have any thoughts as a commission on that.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Parks?
A good point. I think that looking at all of the facades sort of collectively, I note how fairly solid, the solid to void ratio is far different on the other parts of the facade. So that central portion at the corner is distinctly different. And it may be quite tall. I think one of the nice things that it does do, though, with the internal staircase in that space, it will, in theory, you'll see people walking up and down the stairs, and it will provide a level of visible activity from the street inside the building rather than turning a colder shoulder to the street, kind of like the retail center across the street kind of has a concrete block that faces the corner that's not very friendly, whereas this one, I think, feels a little bit more friendly, though it is, 3 stories of glass is going to be fairly imposing. I will not deny that.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Owens?
Yeah, I agree. I think seeing straight brick would not be at all what I would want to see on this corner. And I appreciate the applicant's efforts to make it a transparent and pedestrian friendly, especially at that street level. I think up a little bit higher, that's where I am still slightly concerned, especially because if it is lit, it's going to spill a lot of light out. And when it's an empty building, it's like, okay, they're not there right now, I guess. And then also the rendering showing the cross up there. I worry that this is just trying to straddle the line between being a religious institution and being an office use. We don't regulate use here, obviously. But I think in this instance, I do feel like a lot of the elements of the design are trying to call to mind that this is like a religious institution, it is a church. And that concerns me for the adaptive reuse of the building, because I would like to see it last forever onward. It's clearly a building they're trying to build in perpetuity with beautiful materials, which is something I really appreciate. These are really historic materials. So speaking to how is it grounded in historic, these are really beautiful materials we like to see in the historic districts: sandstone, brick, the aluminum windows, high transparency. There's a lot of things I really like about this project, but I think it is trying to straddle that line a little bit. And I worry that in the future, even if it isn't residential use, I'm not sure what commercial would want to come into this building, given that it does give off that look of a church from this front window especially. And I think one of the things historic districts and buildings are known for is that they are so adaptively reused over the years. That's what we like to see happen throughout the district. So I think that that level concerns me a little bit. I don't know if you see that as well.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Montoro.
not to change the subject entirely, because I think Commissioner Owens has made really great points. But for me, some of the heaviest weighing points are brought up by that of the neighbors and the people that live in this area. And almost every single letter we've received on this application has been in opposition of this item. And we had almost full 20 minutes of testimony from the neighborhood association. And that speaks a lot, I think. So I don't know. I think coming back to it, to Commissioner Owens's point, it's a beautiful design. There's a lot of beautiful materials that I really appreciate seeing on a new construction project in our historic districts. And this one is not just in one, but it butts up against another. And it's probably in maybe the busiest intersection of kind of all of the greater historic districts that we see outside of the downtown core. So it's a very significant project. And I just keep coming back to the height. That's what we heard from every single letter of opposition. It's what we heard mainly from ENA, in addition to that they felt there wasn't a lot of communication maybe in ways that they've seen in the past with other projects that they've been a part of. And I still think that I would support Commissioner Malloy's condition of putting in a height exception, or I guess whatever the verbiage would look like, on this application.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Owens.
I guess I have a point of information or clarification. Is it 24,000 square feet? Does anyone remember? Is that roughly? I think that's what we heard from testimony, right? Okay. For 35 offices is 685 square feet per office. It's a pretty big office. That's bigger than most offices I've seen. I know there's a lot of other things that go into this building. We've got conference rooms, we've got large office spaces, we've got storage space, we have mechanical space. We have a lot of different components that go into this office building, but I think we could fit probably 35 offices in a slightly smaller space or on a few fewer floors would be my guess. So if we're looking to fit the same amount of people, I think that also addresses a lot of the parking concerns that we're running into. Is if it's truly a building that's meant to house 35 offices, I don't know that we need 4 floors to do that, or 24,000 square feet. Again, I'm not the applicant, so I can't speak to that. But if we are looking for lower height, I think we could probably accommodate that many offices. And I know that it happens all the time because I've been in many office buildings that accommodate that many people into that many offices and are not 4 stories in height and asking for a height exception to go up to a peak height of 67.4. So I think that might be something that we could consider. And I would also be supportive of a lower height for this structure, especially on that corner.
Madam Chair, and they have that 1-story that comes off the back as well, and I think that's underutilized space. If you're building up to 60 some feet and you only have one story on the back, why aren't you making that a 2-story building to have, or yeah, a 2-story addition to have additional space and offices or conference room? I think there's definitely room for improvement on this project, which is why this project sort of makes me mad, because we deferred it. We asked for them to go back and do improvements to the height and massing, and they did not do that. Which is why I've sort of at the point where I feel like the height exception that they're asking for is not acceptable.
Other comments or discussion?
Madam Chair, I also would support some sort of height restriction because I do feel like it seems like a lot. And I know it's not up to my opinion, but I do agree with the other commissioner as far as the slate roof, the construction of the building. Definitely the alternatives to screening HVAC equipment is not nice. So, but it does seem to be the main complaint outside of parking. And so I think that we have to look at that.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioner Sales. Do we have a motion or is further discussion needed? Right now, I'm hearing a height limit, and then do we have anything about massing or that glass massing on the front? I think maybe giving some direction would be helpful.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Montoto.
Commissioner Malloy makes a really great point that we deferred this with asking them to look at height and massing, and they came with an application that didn't do that. And so I'm almost inclined to deny the project altogether because we didn't get what we asked for, and we're still hearing opposition from the public and the neighborhood association. That being said, if there were a motion put forward to lower that height, I would support that as well.
Okay. Discussion or a motion?
I guess I want to hear, sorry, Madam Chair. I'd like to hear if anyone else has any thoughts on that glass facade on the front, because if we are going to give them any direction to come back with a revised design instead of denying it outright and hope they actually come back with a revised design next time, then I would like to give them direction on that piece as well. But I'd want to hear, your expertise and your thoughts on that matter as well to see if we should direct them to make any changes. I guess I hesitate to say unilaterally that's something I want to see changed because I don't know what exactly would be a better front facade in that area. I don't know that I want to see just brick, right? Like we talked about, it's not what we want to see. However, I do think it forms a little bit of a imposing facade on the primary facade right there.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Malloy.
Commissioner Parks, do you had any of your professional thought onto the front massing and how to break it up?
So, Madam Chair, as I'm hesitant to design from the bench, it's not something I'd really like to do. I feel that the applicant has made a good case for why they did what they did in the notion of making clear where the entry of the building is and celebrating the corner. There are lots of ways to celebrate building entry and semi-urban corner. I think the way they've done it is nice. It is only 30 feet wide. I'm not sure what other direction one might give, other than potentially just reducing the amount of glazing in general with other materials, but still, wanting to achieve that goal of celebrating the corner. But I will restate, I'm happy with the design the way it is. Architects, each one of us would design the project differently. What they've presented, I feel, complies with the intent of the guidelines and the spirit of the guidelines. I know there's a lot of discussion about height. I feel that the height is in working with the surrounding properties as has been demonstrated, and the reason for the height makes sense to me. Office buildings serve many different functions inside of them for an organization to run. Not all of it is just straight office space. It is, I won't say luxurious, but you know, the building has some amenities to it that are not typical in office spaces. So, you know, when you break it down in square feet per occupant, it is fairly large. But I think that I don't know that there's anything from a historic preservation standpoint that would allow us to deny it. Perhaps it's up to planning and zoning, but you know, I think the height is a question that's been raised by the commission. I've stated my position and hold to that. I haven't been swayed otherwise, but there you go.
Thank you, Commissioner Parks.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Owens.
I think my issues with that imposing facade might be already addressed by a smaller height. Like if we're not going up an extra floor, I don't think it would bother me nearly as much because we have a lot of different, you know, fenestration. There's a lot that breaks it up. And I think if it were maybe one floor lower, and I won't say that that's what we're going to require, but seeing less height, I think would make it less imposing in the first place. So.
I agree, Commissioner Owens. I do like, somebody brought up, you know, the motion that you can see through those windows, and it makes it less of, I'm thinking of, you know, the blocks that are south of that are office buildings. They're dead blocks. Like you walk through there, you don't see people aren't on the street. And this is, you know, it's the gateway to the north end. It's lively. It's a neighborhood. There's the co-op there. There's this sense of community. And so I don't want to see something put there that's going to be, you know, a building that's just being used inside and not contributing to the sense of place in this area. And I think having some motion where you can see people move in there can help that, because the use is outside of the scope of what we can decide on. Any other discussion or motion?
I guess I will make a motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy.
So I motion to approve DRH 23-00329 with the staff's recommendations of approval and a condition that the building not go above 45 feet to address our concerns with meeting standard 10 of the Secretary of the Interior Standards for Rehabilitation, Treatment of Historic Buildings, to break up the massing and size and scale of the building so it better fits in within our North End Historic District.
Thank you, Commissioner Malloy. Do we have a second?
Madam Chair, I second.
Thank you, Commissioner Sales. Clerk, can you please call roll?
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
No.
Malloy,
Aye.
Parks,
Nay.
Owens,
Aye.
Sales,
Aye.
4 in favor, 2 opposed. Motion carries.
Thank you. And with that, we'll be moving on to item number 3 on the agenda. That's DRH 23-00401 at 2016 North 17th Street. A certificate of appropriateness to construct an addition, alter the character defining facade of a contributing structure, and construct a new detached garage with an accessory dwelling unit above a property in a single-family residential with historic overlay zone. Staff, can we please get the report?
Okay. Here's the site aerial to give an indication of its location. Ignore that the rectangle cuts the house in half. It was a double parcel, and that's how it showed up. But this is, you know, the 2 parcels together. So just imagine the red going there. And here's the site plan. Give an indication of that. And the floor plans. To the left is the existing floor plan. And to the right, you can see the side addition and the steps that lead down to the basement addition, whose plan is here. And in addition to the addition, they're proposing a 2-car garage with an accessory dwelling unit above it. The existing elevations are shown here. And here's the addition to the right and towards the rear of the property, and its east elevation as well. Further proposed elevations. And the elevations of the proposed garage with ADU above it. And these dimensions are showing a relationship of the height of the peak of the house to the height of the garage ADU. And some photographs in the area or of the property itself, and then adjacent properties. This addition is set back from the primary facade. The roof lines relate to the primary building. The addition will use wider siding than the original structure, thus differentiating it from the historic home. There will be a basement addition, which reduces the size of the rear addition, as a lot of the space that's needed is subterranean. The addition will require the existing house to be lifted and reset after the basement addition is constructed to facilitate positive slope, which is drainage from a yard. So the water doesn't drain towards the property, but it drains away to storm sewer, et cetera. So therefore, they're proposing raising the height of the walls by 4 inches to allow for more ceiling height as an addition. When they're going to make it 4 inches higher, so that because the current ceiling height is now at or below 8 feet. And therefore, with consultation with the applicant, it's determined that they will have an engineer assess the feasibility of the lift and the addition of wall structure to raise the height. And if it is determined infeasible, they will not proceed. And we have conditioned that in this report. The ADU is got a height of 22 feet. The existing residence is a 1-story structure whose height is 1710 to the peak, or will be. And that's a 4'2" difference. But given the shortness of the primary residence and the applicant's effort to greatly reduce the height from their original submission, it was somewhat taller before the garage ADU. Staff feels that the difference is acceptable and it helps to further the city's goals of providing more affordable housing and increasing density. And the design uses gabled roofs and dormers and an exterior stairway to the 2nd story. It's the proposed structure features the lap siding, which is congruous to the district, and the material on the house as it stands, just thicker or wider profile now. And that, as I said, that differentiates the addition and the ADU from the original construction. Staff recommends approval of this application, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? All right, hearing none, is the applicant here? Would you like to step forward and state your name and address, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I did not prepare a presentation, but I do have a few things to say. But I'm Jace Skiles, and I recently moved from the home I designed at 411 West Sherman Street in Boise. And now I'm renting at 1623 North Doris Street until this is complete. I am the owner and the applicant for the requested certificate of appropriateness for my contributing historic home at 2016 North 17th Street. This will be my primary residence, and I am thrilled to have the opportunity to contribute to the preservation of the North End Historic District with my proposed changes. Instead of a more extensive renovation, which could potentially alter the home's historic character, I'm proposing a modest addition, ensuring that the historical essence of the home is retained wholly. And the proposed changes include a small basement, a 2-car garage with an ADU above, and then a minor add-on off to the side. I've worked with Richard Jarvis to reduce the height of the garage and ADU by a total of 4 feet, lessening the impact of the new structure off the alley. I will provide which is shown on the site plan, a 3rd parking spot specifically designated for the future tenants of the ADU. I plan for this parking spot to have its own EV charging station, providing both dynamic and much needed additional rental options in the North End. It is important to note that my proposed lot coverage is under 25%, which is well below the allowable 35% lot coverage. I do hope this demonstrates my commitment to preserving the character and historical significance of my property and the willingness to improve the neighborhood. In addition, I've been in contact with several neighbors who expressed their support for my proposal. I've also discussed my project with the North End Neighborhood Association Historic Team, and I've agreed to several measures to ensure my project enhances the neighborhood. These measures include permeable pavers, exterior downlighting, and a reduction in the size of the north-facing windows on the ADU to ensure maximum privacy for my neighbor at 2020 North 17th Street. That wasn't really a requirement of them, but just a suggestion. So I went ahead and the drawings that Richard has that he showed, they reflect those changes. And then with the previous public hearing being pushed until tonight, I preemptively completed both construction drawings as well as structural engineering for my project, and I'm happy to provide these for your reference if needed. So I thank you all for your time consideration. I hope you feel my proposal is a positive contribution to the North End Historic District. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair, I have a quick question. It shows in the drawings that you had vinyl siding on the addition. Are you planning to use smooth fiber cement?
Yep, so that vinyl siding was on the existing rear portion of the home, which the dimensions of the property or the existing structural remain the same. However, that rear portion will be reframed. The ceiling heights are currently like 5'10" on the interior. And with that rear portion, I drew it that wraps around. So there's a nice point where it dies between the north and east corner, where the 2-inch lap siding will come. On that corner, it will die into the 7-inch smooth hardy siding, which will wrap, which will be the same hardy siding, which will be on the ADU. So yeah, certainly no vinyl siding anywhere on this structure once
Okay.
it's complete.
Thank you.
And you understand it's smooth, hardy boarded?
Yes,
or
yep, so it'll be a
cement
smooth hardy
floored?
siding on, yep, and then
Okay.
all smooth hardy trim, which I certainly noted, if not on the preliminary plans, I certainly noted those on the construction set.
We've had some issues lately, so just making sure.
Yep, certainly.
Excellent. Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there a representative from the Neighborhood Association? Please step forward, state your name and address for the record.
Hi, Sandra Herman, 1404 North 7th Street. Madam Chair and Commissioners, we appreciate the rehabilitation of this small contributing home and think the additions add smart space to the home with only a minor change to the facade with a clear delineation between old and new. Because this is a one-story house on a low foundation, we are happy with how the owner worked with Richard to reduce the height of the ADU. Owner was attentive to our questions and we appreciate the extra information. Owner plans down shielded lighting and permeable paving. Nina would like to remind homeowners and contractors that materials listed within the accepted plans are part of an agreed upon contract with the city. It is important to adhere to the materials as listed as they are part of standards in the historic neighborhood. Changing materials without consulting the city could result in fines, delays, and mitigation at the contractor or homeowner's expense. That's it.
Thank you very much. Questions for Nina? All right. Is anybody present wishing to testify in support or opposition of this project, either in person or online? No? All right. Hearing none, the applicant has a 5-minute rebuttal if you would like. You don't need to take it if you don't want to.
Yeah, I would just probably reiterate, the note on the exterior materials. So like I said, I plan to follow everything on the drawings, from like the windows to the doors. There probably will even be a step above the requirements. It's my primary residence and, it's going to take a large investment for a smaller home. So I, certainly plan to exceed some of those requirements as well.
Fantastic.
Yep,
Thank
thank
you. All right. With that, we'll close the hearing and render a decision, either motion or discussion.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Parks.
I would move approval of DRH 23-00401 at 2016 North 17th Street.
Fantastic. Before we get to a second, I just want to say I'm so excited to see something under the maximum coverage. So thank you for that.
It's so rare.
It is. All right, second, somebody.
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Montoto. Clerk, please call the roll. Oh. Oh, yours.
Maroney,
Aye.
Montoto,
Aye.
Malloy,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Owens,
Aye.
Sales,
Aye.
all in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And that concludes our meeting tonight.